Today I'm going to show you a special foundation technique which I know you're going to love as much as I do. It's going to give you the most flawless, natural looking finish. So stay tuned so we can get right into it. So first off, we're going to start with skincare. Now it is really important to get your skincare right with this technique because you want that extra hydration. You don't want your skin to feel too dry. And I guess that's with any technique. So we really want to make sure we get a skincare on point. So I'm going to be using my Charlotte Tilbury Magic Serum. I've been using this lately during the day and I actually really love it. I mean, I'm still waiting to see the drastic results, to be completely honest, but you know, it just feels good. So I'm going to smooth this over. Now I just let that sit on the skin for a little while before I actually move in with the next face product. So in the meantime, I'm going to use an eye cream. I've started this new day eye cream and I'm really loving it. It's the Shiseido Future Solution LX Ultimate Brilliance Eye Cream. And it's just so luxurious and I love eye creams. So it opens up like this and it's got this little like massage tool. And it's so cute. It's like a little droplet. Anyway, I just basically kind of like lift a little bit up like that. And then I put it around here and then I just smooth around the eye area and I go back in for a little bit more if I feel like I need it. But it's such a nice eye cream. This is great for mature skin too, by the way. I just feel like it really gets into the eye area so well. And it's a nice little massage as well. I'm gonna go ahead and do this side. I'm going to apply my moisturizer. I'm going to use my Shiseido Future Solution LX Total Protective Cream E, which is SPF 20 as well. I'm just going to get a little bit of this out. I went to a Shiseido event the other day and we got these products just as a gift. It was one of the best events I've been to in a long time because it was just so wholesome. We sat and they taught us how to make matcha, and then we did this whole Japanese technique of, you know, where you have a smashed bowl and you glue it together and make it look pretty. It was really good. And I have always loved Shiseido, but I haven't gone out actively and, you know, purchased skincare. So I want to try it and see what I think. So this is a cream. It's really, really nice, actually. It's so hydrating. You can feel that it's really going to hydrate your skin. Now that the moisturizer's done, we're going to add primer. I'm using my Milk Hydro Grip Primer. This just ensures that everything kind of holds onto my skin. Well, my skin holds onto products, more like. It's a very tacky primer, so you'll feel like it's a little bit sticky, but that's actually perfect. Now, there are a few stages of this whole process of concealer sandwiching. The first one is applying a veil of foundation, so a very thin layer of foundation, and brushing it into the skin. Not so much for coverage, but just to add that nice, like, even out your skin tone. So don't worry about the coverage at this point. Next step would be to apply your concealer. This is where you apply it for coverage, covering up the dark circles, lifting, whatever you use your concealer for. Next, you're going to apply another layer of foundation, but another thin veil of foundation, so it's not going to be heavy. The foundation you use should be light to medium coverage, preferably light, because honestly you don't actually need a medium or full coverage foundation with this whole technique. Now, as you can tell by what I've explained to you, it is a concealer sandwich. So we've got foundation, concealer, and then foundation again. So we're sandwiching that concealer in. Now, it isn't just about doing it that way. There is a whole process involved. It's not technical at all. It's super easy, and I actually think you're going to love this. And the result is pretty flawless, but at the same time, it's not heavy. It doesn't feel as heavy as underpainting, and it's great for those of you who don't like applying concealer before foundation. If you like applying foundation and then your concealer, because visually it just works better for you. It's hard to explain, but I get what you mean, why you would prefer it. I still use underpainting, but I usually use that when I'm going for a full day and I don't want my makeup to like budge, or it's like a full evening event, or I want a fully flawless look. This concealer sandwich effect is really good for just daytime, even evening, if you're not really wanting a whole load of makeup on. So skincare and primer is all on. Now we're going to apply a thin veil of foundation. The foundation I'm going to use is my Nars Sheer Glow, and this is in Barcelona. I've got a very small amount on the back of my hand. This is where I get my foundation brush. I'm using my Sigma Beauty F85 brush. Don't forget, you can get 10% off with NINAUBHI 10, the code. And I'm gonna basically buff this into the brush first, and then I'm gonna buff this into my skin. Really, honestly, don't worry about coverage. This is not about coverage. Use a small amount. This is just to get a nice veil of color over your skin. And it actually stops you from using so much concealer. That's why I think you're gonna love this. So we're really kind of buffing this into the skin. Like I said, there's a process, and that process is obviously a bit to do with how long you wait between each layer, but also what you're using and the technique you're using to apply it. I feel like we're kind of done. That's literally all we want. I wanted to get an even layer all over. It's not about the coverage again, it's just about getting a veil of color. Now we're gonna wait a second so we can move on to the concealer. You wanna wait probably around 30 seconds or so. Just let that foundation settle into the skin. So I'd say we can move on to the concealer now. I'm using my Tarte Shape Tape in 35N medium. You can use whatever concealer you want to use. This is just my concealer, the one that I use. So I'm going to apply this on different areas. First off, I'm just going to do my eyelids. I want to get that out of the way. And you know I do this the same no matter what technique I'm using for my foundation. So this is the same thing I do every time. I'm just going to put a little bit of concealer on my lids. Buff this in. I like to just get this out of the way. It's just, you know, my way of doing it. I just feel like it's just so much easier. Once your eyelids are done, you can just carry on with the rest of your face, and it just actually looks a lot cleaner, and you can focus on your skin as opposed to just worrying about your eye area too. So I'm just gonna get my powder puff, which is my Laura Mercier, and my powder, which is my Makeup Forever Ultra HD powder. Just gonna set this here and then dust this off with my Real Techniques brush. There you go. And now that my eyelids are done, I feel like now we can just focus with the rest of, focus on the rest of the face. Okay, so now I want to apply my concealer wherever I want it on my face, whether it's for like dark circles, coverage, lifting, whatever. So you can apply it however and wherever you want on your face. I wouldn't focus on covering the entire face because it defeats the whole point. Like, you really want the areas that you're quite happy with to look quite natural, and you really just want to use your concealer to help kind of cover up areas that you're uncomfortable with, or you want it to be a bit brighter, or, you know, covering up blemishes and stuff like that. But equally, you don't want to go overboard with the concealer, so there's a massive contrast between that area and then the areas that don't have any concealer on it. So I'm going to apply it to my under eyes because that's obviously where I always apply it. And I don't go too close to my under eyes because, like, as in my under, like, lower lash line, because otherwise it starts to look a bit masky. So I'm just going to apply a little bit here because I do like to have a bit of lift there. Okay, I'm just going to buff this in, so just pat it, keep it in the same place. Okay, so we're gonna go into the under eye area. Let's just buff this in. I generally use a concealer which is a bit lighter than my skin tone because I like the area to be a bit brighter here. You know, I wouldn't aim for this if you're not used to it. Just use your usual concealer color that you use. Okay, I'm happy with that coverage. I'm gonna move over to this side and just buff this in. Now, if you want to apply any kind of contouring or liquid bronzer, or use a concealer as your bronzer or contour, you can. I like to do that sometimes, depends what I feel like. So I'm going to apply some today. I'm using my Nars Radiant Concealer. I'm just going to apply a little bit here and here. That's it. I'm not really fussed about anywhere else. So I'm just getting my Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood complexion brush, and I'm just going to buff this in. So I'm keeping it in the same place, but I'm just kind of buffing over it. Before we move on to the next step, you do want to let your concealer sit for a little bit. Let it marinate. You want it to kind of like just settle into the skin, almost like self-set a little bit so that you can move on to the next step. Because I don't want all this to stay fluid before we move on to the next step. I want this to kind of just dry itself out a tiny bit, you know? So we're gonna let that sit for a minute and then we'll move on to the foundation. So I'm just gonna have a bit of coffee in the meantime. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit of that foundation on the back of my hand. Again, not a lot, probably the same amount as you applied the first time round. Now, we're not gonna apply it with a brush because obviously if we apply it with a brush, we're gonna be like disturbing all of this kind of coverage and everything we've done. We don't wanna move the concealer around anywhere. What we want is to buff the foundation into the skin on top so that everything stays intact, but also we're not focusing on coverage with this foundation. We're literally just creating like a veil of color, very light coverage, remember. So I'm gonna go into the foundation with my sponge and I'm going to start just applying it all over. You shouldn't necessarily kind of visually be able to see a whole load of foundation go on your skin. Like if you feel like, okay, I'm not seeing it, don't worry about it. As long as you've put it onto your sponge, you know it's going there. It's just very light. And we're just going to move across the rest of the face. So just go over the under eye area. And we're kind of like just meshing everything together. See, even the dark concealer we applied along the cheekbones, you can still see it coming through. Now that you've applied this foundation everywhere, we're going to move on to setting it. You want to get your powder puff. I use the Laura Mercier powder puff. It's one of my favorites. And I also use the Makeup Forever Ultra HD setting powder in light banana. Now, before I go into setting everything, I do want to make sure that I take out any excess product in any lines or creases, like anything that started to crease up. I personally would kind of wait a little bit after you've applied your foundation, let everything settle into creases, because that way you're getting rid of all the excess before you actually set, rather than setting and then it all develops and then you're just like, oh my god, what do I do? So let it settle into those creases. And now that I've kind of like let it settle a little bit, what I am going to do is set my under eyes first. That's usually the most important part for me. Once I've done that, I can focus on the rest of the face. So I'm going to get my sponge, use the pointy part of the sponge, and I'm just going to lift any product that seems to be sitting in any kind of lines. This is usually where I get that kind of product settling in. Then I go straight into my powder and I press this in on my under eye area. I'll be dusting this powder away in a second, but first I want to apply the powder everywhere else on the face. So I'm going to make sure I get the back of my sponge, and I'm just going to kind of get rid of any lines that have formed in my smile lines. I'm then going to apply this powder, but with a brush, because I don't want a whole like cakey look. So I really just want to kind of like lightly dust this powder over the rest of the face. You can use a powder puff to set the rest of the face if you really do want it to stay matte, but it's completely up to you. I always use a powder puff for the under eye area because I just want that to like not disturb for the rest of the day. Now I'm going to use my Real Techniques brush and just dust off that powder from the under eye area. There's nothing on my brush, it's completely clean. Now that the base is finished, I do want to add the rest of my kind of makeup, you know, like bronzer, mascara, get my brows done, so I'll be back in a second. Now that we've done that, you can see how it's kind of finished off the whole face. I feel like when you apply all these little bits on top, like your brows, mascara, blush, everything, it just kind of finishes the whole look. Everything just looks a bit more polished and put together, and it just looks so different when you only have your base on. Actually, when you have your base on and you don't have anything else on, I feel like it can look a little bit scary, and a lot of people tend to get worried like, okay, it looks way too cakey, it looks too kind of like powdery. A couple of things that I really want you to understand. If it's looking too powdery to you because you've just applied everything in terms of your base, don't worry, because that will settle down. Initially, when you first apply your foundation and your setting powder, you have to understand that it is going to look a little bit powdery. If you want it to last for as long as possible, you're going to have to apply the powder. That is what's going to keep it in place, but it's not going to stay looking powdery. Your skin needs to settle down a little bit with that makeup on so that your natural oils can come through and make everything look a little bit more lived in. So it won't look like that for hours and hours. Just give it at least, I'd say anything between 30 minutes to an hour and a half. I feel like that's roughly when you can see your skin starting to settle down. So don't worry so much if it does look a little bit powdery. It will settle down and start to look a little bit more natural. Also, if you don't have that patience and you want it to look settle down immediately, you can use something like a hyaluronic setting spray or just a hyaluronic spray. A good one that I have found, which isn't a setting spray, but I do like it to just add a little bit more kind of moisture to the skin on top of foundation sometimes, and that's the Dole 10 Skin Genius Super Spray. So it's actually a hyaluronic spray serum, so you can apply this after your skincare, before everything, or as a serum, or you can apply it afterwards to just like kind of just give your powdery, just done foundation base a bit more of a lived in, settle down look. Hopefully now you know what concealer sandwiching is. I really do hope you try this technique out because it's something I think you're gonna like. Just remember, foundation must be light coverage, and remember all the little bits that I did. So go back and rewatch it if you need to. Do it with me again so that you can get it right. I really, really do hope that you love this technique as much as I do, and please do spread the word because I haven't actually seen this technique anywhere, and it'd be nice to get other people trying it too. So wherever you are in the world, I'm sending you loads of love. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so that you don't ever miss a future video. Until the next video, take care, and I'll see you soon.